Okay, so we're going to just talk briefly about the two parts of photosynthesis. So the scientists have decided to um, divide it up, and it's how it happens inside the chloroplast. So step one is something called the light reactions, and that is where light is involved. And we also need water in the light reactions. And notice the definition says light energy is converted to chemical energy. And that chemical energy is ATP and NADPH. This is a new molecule we're going to be talking about a lot. So then the second step is the Calvin cycle. And the Calvin cycle, notice the definition, organic molecules are produced using carbon dioxide and the chemical energy stored in ATP and NADPH. So we can see in this picture, ATP and NADPH go into the Calvin cycle. This is where carbon dioxide comes into the equation, and then out comes the sugar. So you can kind of see the light reactions involve light and water, and then the product of oxygen is made. And then in the Calvin cycle, we take in the carbon dioxide, and now finally sugar is made. So how does this whole thing work? How do we capture light energy? How do plants capture light energy? So first of all, the light reactions require light. That's why they call them that. They actually used to call the Calvin cycle the dark reactions because they didn't require light. But now that's the Calvin cycle, named after a scientist. So remember that eukaryotes have chloroplasts. That's all these green things in this picture down here. And the chloroplasts are in charge of absorbing light, right? And they're found in the plant cells and algae cells. Remember that chloroplasts have two membranes. They have thylakoids, which are the flattened sacs inside the second membrane. They have grana or granum, which are the stacks of thylakoids. And they have stroma, which is the liquid around the grana. So here's a picture again. This is down here what it actually looks like. So it's kind of interesting how artists, I think, have a much good imagination. So one stack inside is a thylakoid, and then the whole stack is a granum, and then all these stacks in here are grana. We have our outer membrane, then there's a space called the inner membrane space, and then we have the second membrane. And inside the second membrane is filled with a fluid called stroma. So that's going to be important as we talk about being either inside the thylakoid or out in the stroma. Now, chlorophyll is a pigment that reflects green light. That's why we see green. It's how all things work with color. What we see is what is reflected. So the light gives off the colors of the rainbow: red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and violet. So all those colors of the rainbow are coming down and hitting the plant or the chloroplast or the thylakoid. All those colors are absorbed except for green. And so then green is reflected, and then we see green. So there are two kinds of chlorophyll A and chlorophyll B. So chlorophyll A is the pigment that is directly involved with the light reaction. So when we start talking about the light reactions and the pigments, we're usually talking about chlorophyll A. But there is chlorophyll B, and notice that it's an accessory pigment, so it kind of helps chlorophyll A. It's extra, but as we look down here, I want you to again look at this graph because we will ask you to read it. So this is in wavelength of light in nanometers, and this shows you again the colors of the rainbow. This is a visible light, right? Red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and violet. And you can just see the wavelength, right? So violet is much smaller wavelength than red. And then over here, the absorption of light by chloroplast pigments. So chlorophyll A absorbs blue, but not green, and then absorbs red. Chlorophyll B absorbs blue, but not green, and then absorbs red. But notice the difference. Chlorophyll B absorbs more blue than chlorophyll A. But then chlorophyll A absorbs more red than chlorophyll B. So that's what this is telling us up here, right? Chlorophyll B is more blue and less red than chlorophyll A. So that's what this graph is showing us. And then you can see carotenoids. It's on our next slide. And so it's another pigment, and you can see that it reflects yellow, and it doesn't even, and it actually kind of looks like it reflects all these end colors, right? So it absorbs violet and blue and green, or a little bit of green, but then nothing else. And so those pigments give us the other colors like yellow or orange or brown. And that's why the trees can turn from green to yellow to orange or to brown. So plants have lots of different pigments. Chlorophyll is the one that we really care about because we're talking about photosynthesis, but do know there are other pigments in plants. And that is the end of this section of notes.